Imagine you're running for your absolute life in the pitch black of night. You are completely exhausted. You are terrified.
Right.
And every single time you look over your shoulder, you just see the glowing eyes of a lion
Right.
just forcing you further and further into the unknown.
It's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, it really is. But what if you found out later that the terrifying beast in the dark wasn't actually trying to devour you at all?
Oh, man.
What if that lion was actually this fiercely loving protector, deliberately orchestrating every single terrifying detour just to keep you from, I don't know, running off a cliff?
That completely flips the script.
It does. And that brings us to today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources today.
That really are.
Yeah. We have C.S. Lewis's classic fantasy novel, The Horse and His Boy. But, and here's the twist, we are pairing it with a very specific, highly detailed theological commentary on the text.
Right, because our goal today is to really explore what these sources argue is hidden just beneath the surface of what, most people think is just a children's story.
Exactly. So, how are we approaching this?
Well, we are going to be unpacking a very specific framework. The commentary we're analyzing approaches this novel from a conservative, evangelical perspective.
Okay, got it.
And the authors of these sources argue that Lewis wasn't just writing a fun adventure about talking animals.
Right, it's not just a fairy tale.
Exactly. They make the case that he was constructing this profound, intricate mirror for the Christian walk.
Wow.
Yeah. So our focus today is to look at how this analysis breaks down the story of a young boy's journey from slavery to royalty.
And how does that apply to the listener?
Well, according to the commentators, this narrative is designed to help a reader understand biblical theology more deeply. It helps you trust the hidden hand of God in daily life and cultivate a deeper spiritual resilience.
I love that.
And we will look at all the theological concepts the sources bring up, but don't worry, we will make sure to define the heavy terminology in plain language as we go.
Definitely. No textbook jargon today. So, just to give you a roadmap of where we are heading, we need to set the scene.
Please do.
If you aren't familiar with the book, it takes place entirely during the golden age of Narnia.
Right. The High King Peter era.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The era when High King Peter and his siblings are ruling the land. But the interesting thing is, the story doesn't start in Narnia at all.
No, not at all.
It starts far to the south in this massive, deeply oppressive desert empire known as Calormen. And we follow a young boy named Shasta.
Right.
Now, Shasta is fair-skinned, which makes him stand out a lot down there, and he's been raised by this deeply cruel, impoverished fisherman.
Arshish.
Yes, Arshish. And early on, Shasta overhears a conversation and realizes he isn't the fisherman's biological son. And worse, he's about to be sold into slavery to this wealthy, terrifying lord who just happens to be passing through.
Right, and that realization is really the catalyst for everything that follows.
Yeah, his whole world gets turned upside down.
Completely.
Yeah.
Faced with the reality of this brutal enslavement, Shasta discovers that the wealthy lord's horse is actually a kidnapped, talking war horse from Narnia.
Named Bree.
Exactly, named Bree.
Right, and Bree basically convinces Shasta to make a run for it.
He does.
They steal away in the middle of the night, aiming for the mythical free land of Narnia in the north. And along the way, through a series of completely chaotic accidents, they collide with another runaway.
Aravis.
Right. Her name is Aravis, and she is this high-born Calormen noblewoman fleeing an arranged marriage. And she is riding her own talking Narnian mare named Hwyn.
So you have these four completely different personalities.
Yeah, two humans, two talking horses, just forced to join together. And they embark on this desperate, grueling journey across a blistering desert, trying to stay ahead of wild lions and eventually an entire invading army.
It is a massive physical journey. But the sources we are looking at focus heavily on the spiritual journey mirroring it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the theological analysis argues that Shasta's story is fundamentally a picture of the biblical pattern of rescue.
The Exodus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To understand that, the commentary points us to where Shasta's life begins, drawing a very direct line between Shasta's origin and the biblical account of Moses.
The parallels are pretty impossible to ignore once you see them. I mean, the book tells us that Shasta was found as an infant washing ashore in a small boat on the beach.
Right.
Which is where the fisherman Arshish found him and took him in. And the commentary immediately links this to the book of Exodus.
Where Moses is placed in a basket on the Nile River.
Yes, to save him from Pharaoh's decree.
And the sources argue this is a deliberate narrative echoed by Lewis. The fouling trope is common in literature, sure, but the commentary highlights the specific theological markers Lewis uses here.
Like what?
Well, in both the biblical account of Exodus and Lewis's fantasy narrative, you have a child of royal or covenantal lineage,
Okay, so Moses is a Hebrew.
right? Part of God's covenant people. And Shasta, as we find out later, is of northern royal blood. Both infants are rescued from certain death by being drawn out of the water.
Wow, grown out of the water, yeah.
But then they are raised in a highly oppressive foreign environment that is completely alienated from their true heritage.
Right, Moses in Egypt, Shasta in Calormen.
Exactly. And the ultimate trajectory for both characters is that they are called to leave their bondage, cross a wilderness, and play a massive role in saving their true people.
That is so cool. Let's talk about that oppressive environment for a second, because Calormen is brutal.
It really is.
When you read the descriptions of the society Shasta grows up in, the contrast between the Southern Empire and the northern realms of Narnia is jarring. I mean, Calormen is an absolute dictatorship.
Right.
The ruler, the Tizrock, has ultimate life and death power over everyone, and the wealth disparity is just staggering.
And the theological sources lean heavily into this geopolitical contrast. They actually bring in the philosophy of the early church father Augustine.
Oh, the city of man versus the city of God.
You got it.
Ugh.
According to the commentary, Calormen functions as Lewis's literary representation of the city of man.
Meaning a society built on human effort.
Built entirely on human pride, yeah. It is driven by exploitation, systemic chattel slavery, rigid caste hierarchies, and the worship of a bloodthirsty avian deity named Tosh.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It is. The commentary points out that in the city of man, human value is determined entirely by utility and power.
You can actually hear that hierarchy in how the characters talk, too.
Yes, the dialogue.
The dialogue in Calormen is completely saturated with these extravagant, almost suffocating honorifics.
Oh, yeah.
There is this scene early on where Arshish, the fisherman, is beating Shasta for some minor infraction. But the moment a wealthy Tarkaean, which is their word for a lord, rides up, Arshish just throws himself face down in the dirt.
Immediately.
Suddenly, he is speaking in this incredibly elevated, flowery language, calling the Lord, "Oh, my master," and referring to Shasta as the prop of my old age and the delight of my eyes.
He doesn't love Shasta at all.
No, he just wants to drive up the selling price.
And the commentary suggests that this specific use of language is Lewis's way of showing spiritual degradation. The language in Calormen is designed to mask coercion and greed.
That makes so much sense.
The sources note how characters end every mention of the Tizrock with the phrase, "May he live forever."
Right, it's required.
It's a classic ancient Near Eastern imperial trope. And the analysis argues it reveals a society built entirely on performance, fear, and self-preservation. You flatter the person above you to survive, and you crush the person below you to feel powerful.
Which is the exact opposite of how the Narnians talk.
Exactly.
When we finally meet the Narnian characters, they are blunt. Sometimes they are even a little rude, but they are honest.
And that's why the analysis frames Narnia as the representation of the city of God. It is characterized by covenantal freedom.
No forced flattery.
None. The commentary highlights that authority in Narnia, unlike Calormen, isn't about domination or extracting wealth from the lower classes. It is fundamentally about sacrificial service.
Right.
The communication is honest, direct, and inherently respects the agency and dignity of the individual, regardless of their status.
The sources make a really compelling point about how we are supposed to read this, though, because it would be very easy to look at the map of this fictional world, point to the south, and say, okay, Calormen represents the bad guys.
Right, just a simple good versus evil map.
Exactly. But doesn't Calormen actually represent the invisible spiritual chains we all wear before we find Christ? The theological analysis argues something much more personal here.
It does.
Yeah.
That is a central thesis of the commentary we were reviewing.
Yeah.
The sources use the Greek word doulia, which translates to slavery or bondage. It's a term the New Testament frequently uses to describe life outside of grace. The analysis argues that just as the Calormenes are bound to their rigid social hierarchy and their performance-based survival, humanity is naturally bound to a system of self-justification.
Wow, so we are all kind of in Calormen at first.
Right. We are trapped in a cycle of trying to earn our worth, masking our true motives, and fearing judgment.
It's like living in a house where you constantly have to perform and manipulate and flatter the people around you just to survive.
Yeah.
To make it through the day completely unaware that a home of unconditional love exists just over the mountains.
That's a great analogy.
And the tragedy, as the sources point out with Shasta, is that he doesn't even know a better world exists at first. He just looks north and feels this inexplicable longing.
Right, he's no Narnia is real.
Exactly. He just knows the life he's living feels deeply wrong.
And that longing is what the commentators identify as the initial prompting of grace.
Now, I do want to bring up something from the sources. We should note that the sources do address a specific literary critique of how Lewis constructed Calormen.
Yes, the cultural context note.
Several modern literary critics have pointed out that Lewis relied heavily on 19th century Middle Eastern tropes to depict this oppressive empire. I mean, he uses imagery like turbans, scimitars, deserts, and multi-armed idols. So how does the conservative evangelical commentary handle that critique? Do they just ignore the Orientalism aspect?
No, the sources actually acknowledge it. They advise that modern readers should absolutely be discerning about cultural stereotypes in older literature.
Okay.
However, the commentary reports, and we're just laying out their argument here, they forcefully argue that Lewis's primary theological target was never ethnicity.
Right.
The analysis asserts that his target was always systemic tyranny, the commodification of human beings, and pagan idolatry.
Things that exist everywhere.
Exactly. Things that have existed in every culture globally, including Western ones. The commentary points out that the broader Narnia canon eventually features a Calormen soldier who is welcomed into heaven by Aslan solely because of his sincere heart, completely bypassing his nationality.
Oh, that's right, in the last book.
Yeah. So according to these sources, the contrast Lewis is drawing is strictly a spiritual one. It's a society that elevates the self and crushes the weak versus a society that submits to a loving creator.
Okay, so realizing you are trapped in that society of bondage is really only the first step of the story.
Right.
Because escaping it is a terrifying ordeal. When Shasta and Bree run away in the middle of the night, they aren't marching out with a conquering army, they are sneaking away in sheer terror.
Yes, they are.
Which brings us to the next major theme the commentary explores, how God supposedly guides people when they are fleeing their old life, and the sheer, unadulterated chaos that seems to follow them.
The sources dedicate a significant amount of analysis to this exact phase of the narrative. They frame it as the transition from the need for rescue to the method of rescue.
Okay.
And the theological point they draw out is that from a limited human perspective, the method of divine rescue often looks like absolute disaster.
Oh, it really does. If you track their journey, it is a masterclass in what anyone would call incredibly bad luck. I mean, just look at the sequence of events.
It's one thing after another.
First, they are riding in the dark, trying to stay hidden, and they are suddenly chased by a roaring lion. This forces them to run wildly off their path and swim for their lives across a tidal inlet.
Right.
But that exact panic is what causes them to accidentally crash into Erebus and Tyquin on the other side.
And what's fascinating here is how the commentary highlights that none of these characters actually want to be together.
Not at all.
Bree and Hare have totally different ideas about leadership, and Aravis actively looks down on Shasta. They are forced into an alliance solely because of the external terror of the lion.
Right, and the bad luck doesn't stop there. Because they are now a larger group, they have a harder time staying hidden. They are literally forced to sneak through the crowded, heavily guarded capital city of Tashbaan in disguise.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Let me just paint the picture of the city for you. It is built on an island, surrounded by a river, packed with millions of people. It smells of unwashed bodies, garlic, and expensive perfumes all mixed together.
Total sensory overload.
Yeah. The streets are incredibly narrow, and the wealthy travel in litters, with guards violently shoving peasants out of the way. And in the middle of this chaos, Shasta gets completely separated from his friends.
And the separation in Tashbaan is viewed by the commentators as the lowest point of Shasta's isolation.
He ends up having to spend the night alone, outside the city gates, among the tombs of the ancient kings.
In a graveyard.
He's a kid sitting in a graveyard in the desert, absolutely terrified of ghouls. The next day, he reunites with his friends, but then they have to endure this blistering, grueling race across the desert to warn the northern kings about a surprise attack.
They are just pushed to their absolute limits.
Dying of thirst, exhausted beyond belief, and right when they cross the border, right when they're within sight of a safe castle in Archenland,
A lion attacks them again.
yes, it forces them to sprint until they literally cannot breathe, and the lion actually catches up to Erebus and slashes her back with its claws. I mean, if I'm Shasta, I'm thinking the universe is actively out to get me.
Oh, completely. But the theological sources use this exact sequence of apparent disasters to illustrate a core tenet of conservative evangelical theology. The doctrine of providence.
Providence, okay. Let's unpack that.
The commentary explores the Hebrew concept of hashgacha, which is defined as God's unseen sovereign hand actively governing all of creation.
So nothing is random.
Exactly. The analysis emphasizes that, from this perspective, God isn't just reacting to the lions or trying to salvage a bad situation. He is actively orchestrating the journey.
Wow.
The commentary argues that providence uses natural events, human choices, and even profound temporary suffering to accomplish a specific redemptive purpose.
The narrative payoff for this in the book is just staggering.
It really is.
Because we find out at the end of the story that Aslan, the great lion, who represents Christ in the Narnian universe, was intimately involved in every single one of those terrifying moments. When Shasta is feeling completely sorry for himself later on, Aslan appears and reveals the truth.
Yes, the big reveal.
Shasta says he has been the unluckiest boy alive, but Aslan corrects him.
The commentary quotes Aslan's revelation extensively here. Aslan tells Shasta that there was only ever one lion.
Oh, it gives me chills.
Aslan says, "I was the lion who forced you to join with Erebus. I was the cat who comforted you among the houses of the dead. I was the lion who drove the jackals from you while you slept. I was the lion who gave the horses the new strength of fear for the last mile so that you should reach King Loon in time."
Here's where it gets really interesting. So, according to the theological analysis we were reading, Aslan doesn't just manage the hardships, he actually uses the terror as a tool.
Yeah.
If the lion hadn't chased them the first time, they never would have met Aravis, and they wouldn't have known about the secret invasion plans.
Right.
If the lion hadn't chased them the second time, they would have rested, and the invading army would have captured the castle. So think about your own life. How many lions, job losses, closed doors, terrifying detours were actually God herding you away from danger and toward your true home?
And the sources draw a direct typological line here to the biblical story of Joseph in the book of Genesis.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
The commentary argues that just as Shasta's story is a string of parent tragedies, Joseph's life follows the same pattern. Joseph is betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused of assault, and thrown into a foreign prison.
It's just one disaster after another.
From a human perspective, it is a sequence of senseless trauma. But when Joseph is eventually elevated to a position of power in Egypt and saves his family from starvation, he says something profound to his brothers in Genesis 50:2. He says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good."
I see where the commentary is going with this. The bad things aren't necessarily good in themselves, but they are repurposed.
Exactly. The theological analysis dives into the original Hebrew of that verse. The word used for the brother's harmful intent is ra, which means evil or misery.
Okay.
But it is contrasted with God's intention, tova, meaning good or beneficial. The commentary argues that Aslan's revelation serves the exact same function for Shasta. It reframes his entire trauma history.
Wow.
The terror he experienced wasn't random cruelty. It was a highly specific, protective mercy designed to get him where he needed to be.
But the sources also tackle a really natural question that comes up here. If Aslan is all-powerful, why put them through the desert at all?
Right. Why not just skip it?
Yeah, why orchestrate this terrifying sequence with lions and graveyards? Why not just magically teleport Shasta and Aravis to safety in Narnia the moment they decided to run?
The commentary addresses that directly by exploring the concept of the divine pedagogy. They reference the early church father Irenaeus, who wrote extensively about how God matures human beings.
Pedagogy meaning like teaching.
Right, divine teaching.
Yeah.
The analysis argues that if Aslan had simply teleported them, he would have only changed their geographical location. But the goal of providence, according to these sources, isn't just a change of scenery.
It's an internal change.
Exactly. It is a fundamental transformation of the heart. The journey itself is the classroom. God is patiently and sometimes painfully shaping their character through the trials.
And what exactly in their character needed to be shaped? The sources suggest it is the hardest, most stubborn part of the human condition, our pride.
Yes, and this marks a transition in the theological commentary. We move from analyzing the external trials of the journey, the physical heat, the pursuit of the lions, the exhaustion, to examining the internal psychological transformation those trials are designed to produce.
Right.
The sources argue that the primary obstacle to spiritual growth for these characters is their own self-reliance.
To understand how the commentary views this, we have to look at the two proudest characters in the group.
Bree and Aravis.
Exactly. First, there is Bree, the warhorse. He has a massive superiority complex. Even though he has lived most of his life as a captured slave in Calormen, he is still a Narnian talking horse.
He never forgets to mention it.
He thinks he is vastly more intelligent and brave than any regular dumb horse. He is incredibly vain about his appearance. There's this funny running joke where he constantly worries about whether real, free Narnian horses roll in the grass because he is terrified of doing something that might make him look foolish or clownish.
Right, his whole identity is built on how others perceive his nobility.
And then there's Aravis. As a high-born Calormen Tarkina, her pride manifests totally differently than Bree's.
Hers is deeply rooted in caste and class.
Yeah, she is genuinely brave and highly capable, but she is also profoundly arrogant. The commentary notes how she completely looks down on Shasta. She dismisses him as a vulgar, uneducated peasant boy who doesn't even know how to ride properly.
She tolerates him only because he's useful for the journey.
Right. But she feels no sense of equality with him whatsoever.
So how does the commentary interpret the journey as a dismantling of this pride? Well, the sources argue that the trials are specifically tailored to strip away the illusions both characters hold about themselves.
Okay, let's break that down.
Let's analyze the commentary's take on Bree first. As a warhorse, his fundamental identity is his courage in battle. He believes he is fearless. But when Aslan attacks them as they were racing toward safety at the end of the book, Bree completely loses his nerve.
It just abandons them.
He panics. He runs away in sheer, blind cowardice.
And the devastating part for Bree is what Shasta does in that moment. Shasta, the kid who doesn't know how to ride, who has no armor, who Aravis thinks is a peasant coward, Shasta literally jumps off his horse and runs back toward the roaring lion to try and save Aravis.
And the theological analysis highlights this as the moment Bree's pride is utterly shattered.
He sees the truth about himself.
He is forced to realize that beneath his talking ability and his noble posturing, he is just as frightened and instinct-driven as any ordinary horse. His self-reliance fails him completely.
Now, the commentary's analysis of Aravis is where things get really intense. I want to pitch you this scenario and hear how the sources defend it, because it is controversial.
Sure, go ahead.
When Aravis was planning her escape from her arranged marriage back in Calormen, she drugged her innocent slave girl to make sure the girl wouldn't wake up and sound the alarm.
Right, to buy herself time.
Later in the story, Aravis casually admits that the slave girl was probably beaten severely for sleeping late, and Aravis's reaction is chilling. She says, "I am very glad they should beat her." She feels zero remorse because, in her mind, a slave's pain just doesn't matter.
The commentary hones in on that specific line to explain what happens next.
Right, because when Aslan chases them at the end of the journey, he actually catches up to Aravis. He rears up and slashes her back with his claws, tearing her armor and her skin.
It's a shocking moment.
It is. Now, if I am reading this without a theological lens, my immediate reaction is, isn't a lion scratching a girl kind of harsh? How does the commentary defend a supposedly loving God figure brutally scratching a young girl who is just running for her life?
The sources anticipate that exact pushback. The commentary defends this by viewing it through the theological lens of severe mercy.
Severe mercy.
Yeah, it's a term coined by Sheldon Vanauken. They connect this violent moment to the biblical principle found in Proverbs that pride goes before destruction.
Okay.
And to 2 Corinthians 12.9, where the Apostle Paul writes about God's power being perfected in human weakness.
But how does the commentary explain Aslan's motivation in that specific moment?
The analysis relies on Aslan's own explanation later in the text. When Aslan speaks to Aravis, he reveals that the scratches on her back were not random. He tells her it was tear for tear, throb for throb, blood for blood, equal to the stripes laid on the back of her slave girl because of Aravis's selfish actions.
Oh, wow. So it was an exact match.
Exactly. Aslan explicitly tells her, you needed to know what it felt like. The theological sources argue strongly that Aslan does not inflict this pain out of vindictive anger or arbitrary punishment.
It's not revenge.
No, he does it to break through the impenetrable shell of her classist arrogance. According to the commentary, Aslan is giving her the one thing she lacks, the capacity for empathy.
The commentary uses an analogy here that I think really helps bridge the gap for a modern reader. They compare it to a medical procedure.
Right, the surgeon.
Yeah. If a bone heals improperly, it grows crooked. A surgeon has to go in and actually re-break the bone so that it can be set right and heal properly. The pain of the surgeon's hammer feels like violence, but its intent is entirely restorative.
That is precisely how the sources interpret this scene. The commentary argues that Aravis's soul was crooked.
Ah, I see.
She was incapable of functioning in the free, egalitarian society of Narnia while still holding on to the cruel hierarchy of Calormen. The pain she experienced was the breaking of that crooked bone.
The sources seem to be saying that you cannot receive grace until you realize you actually need it. As long as Bree thought he was the bravest corpse alive, and as long as Erebus thought she was superior to everyone else, they were closed off.
Exactly. Have you ever had a moment where your own self-righteousness was exposed?
Oh, yeah, it's agonizing.
It's an agonizing feeling. But the commentary argues that this exact moment of shattering is the prerequisite for transformation.
Wow.
The theological term the sources use here is metanoia, the Greek word for repentance.
Which means?
It means a complete change of mind and heart. The analysis argues that once Bree and Erebus are stripped of their illusions, they're finally in a posture to receive love.
That makes a lot of sense.
And crucially, the commentary points out that this humbling process is exactly what prepares the main character, Shasta, for the most profound spiritual encounter in the entire narrative.
Which brings us to one of the most famous scenes in the book. Let's set the stage for this encounter based on the commentary's breakdown. Shasta has just warned the Archenland castle about the invasion, but in the confusion, he has been separated from everyone. He has been given an ordinary horse to ride, and he is walking alone down this dark, misty mountain pass.
He's totally isolated.
Yeah, the adrenaline has completely worn off. He is exhausted, he is starving, and he's feeling incredibly sorry for himself. He feels abandoned by his friends, and he starts crying out loud about how he is the most unfortunate boy in the world.
And the commentary emphasizes the physical and emotional darkness of this scene as a deliberate setup for a divine encounter.
Suddenly, Shasta realizes he is not alone in the mist. He hears the sound of large footsteps walking perfectly in time with his horse.
Right in step with him.
Yes, he can feel the heat of a massive creature's breath on his leg. He is absolutely terrified, thinking it's a monster or a ghost. Finally, he works up the courage to speak, and he asks the creature, "Who are you?"
Such a powerful moment.
And the voice in the dark answers, "Myself." But the text says the voice repeats the word myself 3 times in 3 completely different tones. The first is deep and low, shaking the earth. The second is loud and clear. The third is a whisper that seems to come from all around him.
The theological analysis spends a great deal of time unpacking the massive biblical weight of this specific moment.
Yeah, the 3 voices.
The commentary argues that when the voice says myself 3 times, Lewis is directly evoking Exodus 3.14, the moment God speaks to Moses from the burning bush.
Oh, I am. Tell me who I am.
Exactly. In that biblical scene, God declares his name as I am, W-H-O-I-M. The sources explain that the original Hebrew phrase, Eye, Asher Eye, expresses eternal, self-existent being.
Oh.
By having Aslan answer myself 3 times, the commentary suggests Lewis is making an unmistakable claim about Aslan's divine nature, echoing the Christian concept of the Trinity.
One of the things the sources point out that I found really compelling is what Aslan doesn't do in this scene. Shasta is in the middle of a massive pity party. He is listing off all his grievances. But Aslan doesn't give Shasta a theological lecture on the problem of pain. He doesn't explain the geopolitical necessity of the Calormen invasion.
He doesn't offer a spreadsheet of reasons.
No.
And the commentary views this as a profound pastoral insight. The analysis notes that Aslan simply offers his physical presence. He literally walks between Shasta and the edge of the cliff to keep him safe in the dark.
Wow.
The sources argue that in Christian theology, the ultimate answer to human suffering is not necessarily an intellectual explanation, but the abiding presence of God.
How often do we demand explanations from God for our pain when what he offers us is himself? It's a fascinating look at how we process hardship. We constantly demand explanations. We want to know exactly why a door closed or why a relationship failed or when the pain is going to stop.
We want all the answers right now.
Exactly. The commentary suggests that what is actually being offered in those dark moments is simply the presence of the divine, pacing alongside us in the mist.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources take this further by examining the Christological parallels.
Meaning how Aslan represents Jesus.
Right, how Aslan represents the dual nature of Jesus Christ. They note how Lewis holds 2 seemingly opposite realities in perfect tension. The commentary references Revelation 5, where Christ is described as the terrifying, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah.
Which we see when Aslan attacks the army.
Exactly. We see that aspect of Aslan when he fiercely protects the travelers and later defeats the enemy army. But in this intimate moment in the mist with Shasta, the analysis argues Aslan embodies the Good Shepherd, described in John 10.
The shepherd.
He is tender, he matches the pace of the lost sheep, and he breathes warm life into a terrified child.
There is another piece of dialogue in this encounter that the sources highlight as a major theological warning.
Oh, about Aravis.
Yes. After the sun comes up and Shasta sees that the companion in the mist was the great lion, they have a conversation. Shasta asks Aslan about Aravis, specifically why she had to be scratched by the lion while he escaped unhurt. And Aslan gives a very sharp reply. He says, "Child, I am telling you your story, not hers. No one is told any story but their own."
The commentary zeroes in on this line as a crucial warning against the human tendency to compare spiritual journeys.
We do that all the time.
The sources observe how frequently people look at others and ask, why does that person have it so easy? Or, why did God heal them but not me? The analysis argues that Aslan's response firmly shuts down that line of questioning.
It's none of your business, basically.
Pretty much. The commentary maintains that divine providence is deeply personal, highly individualized, and based on a knowledge of the soul that is infinitely deeper than human perception.
So Aslan vanishes in a flash of golden light, and Shasta is left entirely changed by this encounter.
Completely transformed.
But as the commentary points out, Shasta doesn't just gain a new theological understanding in that mountain pass. He is about to gain a completely new literal identity.
And this transition leads into what the sources consider the core New Testament doctrine illustrated in the book,
Which is,
the miracle of spiritual adoption.
let's lay out the ultimate plot twist of the horse and his boy.
Yes, the big reveal.
Shasta arrives in Archenland just in time to warn King Lune about the invading army. A battle takes place, the invasion is thwarted, and in the aftermath, King Lune is looking closely at Shasta. He is looking at Shasta, and then looking at his own son, Prince Corin.
And they are identical.
They are identical. And the truth is finally revealed. Shasta is not a runaway slave from Calormen. He is not a poor fisherman's son. His real name is Prince Cor.
Prince Cor.
He is the long-lost elder twin brother of Prince Corin and the rightful heir to the throne of Archenland.
It is a classic fairy tale ending, sure, but the commentary unpacks the heavy theology behind it.
Right, because we learn that he was kidnapped as a baby due to a prophecy and lost at sea.
Which just so happened to be the exact moment Aslan pushed his little boat ashore so the fishermen would find him and keep him alive.
Exactly, everything connects.
The theological analysis argues that this narrative twist brilliantly translates the Pauline concept of spiritual adoption.
Paul in the New Testament.
Right. The commentary references the original Greek term huiothesia. They point to Romans 8.1417, where the Apostle Paul writes that believers do not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear.
Which perfectly describes Shasta's old life.
The sources note how perfectly that phrase describes his entire existence under the fisherman Arshish in Calormen. Instead, Paul writes, believers receive the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father.
The commentary suggests that Shasta's sudden elevation mirrors the Christian experience of salvation. One moment, he is a nameless, abused outcast who expects to be beaten or sold.
Right.
The next moment, the king declares him a legitimate, recognized prince of the realm.
The sources highlight that in the theological framework of the New Testament, believers in Christ are brought into full familial rights. They are not merely pardoned criminals.
Their family.
They're made co-heirs with Christ. The commentary emphasizes that this change in status is instantaneous and entirely based on the declaration of the king, not on the merit of the child.
So, what does this all mean? The commentary also touches on the practical reality of this, which I think is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of readers.
Oh, absolutely.
They bring up what we would call today imposter syndrome.
Yes.
When Shasta is told he is Prince Cor, he doesn't magically feel like a prince. He still has the ingrained habits of a peasant. Even when he was riding in the battle, he was clumsy. He doesn't know how to hold the reins on a royal horse.
He feels totally out of his depth.
He feels uneducated, awkward, and completely out of place in a castle.
The analysis views this as a direct analogy to the daily Christian life. The sources point out the tension between justification and sanctification.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, the Bible may declare believers to be royalty, a chosen generation, and co-heirs. But practically, the commentators note, believers wake up every day still battling their old fears, their old habits, and a profound sense of inadequacy.
We feel like we don't know how to hold the reins. We feel like peasants wearing stolen crowns.
The theological response provided by the sources is that identity must be rooted in objective reality, not subjective feeling.
It's not about how you feel.
No. The analysis argues that the believer must remember their identity in Christ is a historic reality initiated by God. Shasta did not earn his crown by being a flawless equestrian or having impeccable table manners.
He was terrible at those things.
Right. The crown was his by birthright, preserved for him by his father's love and Aslan's providence. The commentary stresses that the sanctification process, which for Shasta means getting an education, learning statecraft, and practicing sword fighting, comes after his identity is secure.
Wow.
He doesn't learn those things to become a son. He learns them because he already is a son.
That is a massive paradigm shift. He is a prince solely because the king says he is.
Exactly.
But the commentary also points out that stepping into this new royal identity means eventually having to face the remnants of the old fallen world. Shasta can't just hide in the castle. The war is literally at the gates.
Yes, the Calormen army is there.
And that brings us to the final major theme the sources analyze. The culmination of the battle, the nature of divine justice, and the fate of those who absolutely refuse God's grace.
The sources argue that the personal, internal journey of Shasta scales up in the final act to represent the cosmic, external battle between God's kingdom and the rebellious systems of the world.
This all centers around the Battle of Andvard. Prince Rabadash of Calormen, who led the surprise invasion, is utterly defeated by the combined northern forces.
His whole army is routed.
And Rabadash himself is captured alive. He is brought into the courtyard in chains to face King Lune and Aslan. Now, the commentary focuses heavily on what happens next. King Lune offers Rabadash mercy.
After everything he did.
Right. He says that if Rabadash promises to stop his aggression, they will give him a ship and let him go home in peace.
But Rabadash is so consumed by his own humiliation and pride that he completely rejects the offer.
He responds with shrieking, curses, and violent threats. He literally calls Aslan a foul fiend and a demon.
This raises an important question, though, and the theological analysis treats this scene as a profound exploration of the limits of divine mercy and the nature of final judgment.
Because Aslan's response is incredibly dramatic. When Rabadash refuses to yield, Aslan literally transforms him into a donkey.
Right there in the courtyard.
Right there. Rabadash's ears grow long, his face swells, his hands become hooves, and his arrogant threats turn into loud braying. It is simultaneously hilarious and absolutely terrifying. How do the sources interpret this from a theological perspective?
Well, the commentary addresses the fact that modern readers might view this as an arbitrary vindictive punishment. However, the sources argue that Rabadash's physical transformation into a donkey is actually the outward manifestation of his internal spiritual state.
Oh, wow.
The analysis connects this to the biblical concept that humans become like what they worship. Inside, Rabadash is stubborn, foolish, irrational, and completely driven by animalistic pride.
So the outside is just catching up to the inside.
Precisely. Or rather, that is exactly how the commentary frames it. The sources also draw a strong biblical parallel to the story of King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4.
Nebuchadnezzar, he was the king of Babylon, right?
Right, he was a proud Babylonian king who refused to acknowledge God's sovereignty. As a result, he was driven away from human society and literally given the mind of an animal until he humbled himself.
I see the connection.
The commentary suggests Lewis is using the donkey transformation to illustrate the dehumanizing nature of unrepentant pride.
But the sources also point out the incredible grace hidden even within this bizarre judgment. Aslan tells Rabadash that he will not be a donkey forever.
He gives him an out.
He gives him very specific instructions. Aslan tells him that if he goes back to his own capital city in Calormen and stands before the altar of his own pagan god at the autumn feast in front of all his people, his human shape will be restored.
The commentary highlights the public humiliation required for this restoration, viewing it as the necessary antidote to Rabadash's public arrogance.
But there's a massive catch. Aslan decrees that once Rabadash is healed, he can never go more than 10 miles away from that temple ever again.
He's geographically bound.
Yeah. If he steps outside that boundary, he will turn back into a donkey, and the second change will be permanent. The commentary argues that this is a brilliant picture of how God's discipline works. It contains a pathway to redemption. He gets his humanity back, but it also acts as a strict boundary to prevent him from doing further harm to others.
Fascinating.
The book notes that Rabadash eventually becomes the ruler of Calormen and is known in history as Rabadash the Peacemaker. But he is only a peacemaker because he is literally too terrified of turning into a donkey to ever leave his city to lead an army.
The theological analysis concludes that this represents God's sovereign justice. It limits the destructive power of evil in the world, protects the innocent, yet still leaves room for the offender to experience a form of grace.
even if it's a severe grace.
Exactly, even if it is a severe restrictive grace.
And the commentary contrasts Rabadash's miserable, isolated fate with the scene that immediately follows, the great joyful feast inside the castle of Anvard.
Yes. The sources view this feast as a picture of the eschatological banquet.
What?
The eschatological banquet meaning the kingdom's consummation at the end of time.
Ah, okay. So inside the castle, everyone is gathered together. Shasta, now recognized as Prince Kor, is sitting with his twin brother Corin. Uravis is there as an honored guest. Even the horses, Bree and Hwin, are brought to the table.
It's a complete reunion.
And during this feast, King Lune explains the true nature of leadership to his sons, which the commentary highlights as the ultimate repudiation of the Calormen system. King Lune says that being a king means you must be the first one to charge into a desperate attack, the last one to retreat, and that when there is famine in the land, the king must wear finer clothes but laugh louder over a scantier meal than any of his subjects.
The theological commentary argues that this is the perfect encapsulation of biblical servant-hearted leadership.
It's the total opposite of the Tizrock.
Exactly. The sources point out that it is the exact inverse of the city of man, where the ruler exploits the people to guarantee his own comfort. In the worldview Lewis is constructing, which reflects the conservative evangelical view of the kingdom of God, true authority is always synonymous with sacrifice.
What an incredible journey to unpack. To recap the epic ground we've covered today through the lens of these theological sources, we have explored how the horse and his boy can be read as an illustration of the Exodus, demonstrating the escape from the spiritual bondage of the city of man.
We covered a lot.
We really did. We have examined the commentary's view on the unseen, relentless providence of God, using terrifying circumstances to guide us. We analyzed the painful but necessary stripping away of pride to make room for grace.
Right.
We looked at the dual nature of Christ as both fierce lion and comforting shepherd in the mist. And finally, we unpacked the miraculous gift of spiritual adoption and the ultimate triumph of servant leadership over arrogant tyranny.
As we wrap up this analysis, the overarching application drawn by the sources is an encouragement for the reader to really re-examine their own history.
Yeah.
The commentary suggests that believers should not view their past as a series of random accidents or meaningless detours, but as a carefully authored narrative.
A story being written.
Yes. The sources advocate for welcoming humbling circumstances, arguing that the failure of self-reliance is the very thing that prepares the soul for true fellowship. The ultimate takeaway from this theological perspective is to find security in the objective reality of being an adopted child of the true King.
It leaves you with a lot to think about, especially regarding the things we fear the most. Think about the lions that have chased you in your own life. The terrors, the sudden losses, the forced, painful changes in direction. You have probably spent years wishing those things had never happened.
Most people do.
But what if, as this commentary suggests, when the mist finally clears at the end of your story, you discover that the thing you were running from in sheer terror was actually the very breath of a loving protector, relentlessly driving you away from your own destruction and pushing you toward a home you didn't even know you had. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for the hidden narrative in your own story.